When it's about the color toning, when I work usually, simply speaking, I work usually with color balance. So I have very simple steps what is about my color tuning, and I have few rules that I keep for myself. And this is when I work on the set, I try to make the tones suitable for each image and try to adjust them to the whole set. So I'm not going to add some cold tones to one image and then to other image warm tones. I think it looks horrible. So I usually work on the theme on the images, and of course over the time you always develop your style. So it's always like you have your own style, and I believe everyone who see my work can say it was done by me because we develop certain steps and our own style. So I'm going to show you how I work, and I encourage you to use maybe the same steps but to develop your own style. And I think over a time the style is developing anyway. No matter what you're going to watch, you at first might copy people, but over the time you will be developing yourself better. So I'm going to start with this image, and I also work selectively, even if I work with color balance. So apparently I can work with shadows, midtones, and highlights, but I prefer to work selectively. So I'm going to press S as shadows, and I'm going to copy this, and H as highlights. And in this case, I change blending modes into color to not affect the luminosity values, just the colors. So I'm not changing any contrast anymore, but just work purely on colors, because that's why I worked before on contrast, to make sure it looks just right and the way I want. So I'm going how I work selectively to make sure there is perfect transition between shadows and highlights. I use image and I go through apply image. So the layers are merged and blending multiply, and you will get the perfect shadows over your image. As I work with shadows, I can already press invert or just invert this later. So I'm going to hit OK. And let's have a look into this. So Alter option, and I'm going to hit this. That's how it looks. And that's how look the exact highlights. So something from the midtones to the highest bright point. I'm going to press Command or Control if you work on Windows, and I like invert, and that will be my shadows. So what I'm going to also do, I'm going to press Command and hit on this layer to make selection and apply the inversion into the highlight. So I have now perfect map of my image. Here is the shadows and here is the highlights, and that's how I start working with the color balance. So I'm going into shadows, and I usually check what works over here. And usually I start with the bottom slider to see if the yellows, so something warmer or colder, works on the image. And usually I prefer to go with the cold colors, and what I can see for this image, it's clearly the cold tones what will be suitable over here. I'm trying to work carefully because you don't want to really change the blacks into the blues, so later I always sort out the blacks and take down eventually some of the color saturation from the blacks to keep them natural, because you don't want to change the color of the clothes. Also over here I can check with red and some of the cyans. I'm going to slightly lower this in this case. Let me have a look before after. And for the highlights I go with the opposite way. So as I add some of the cold tones for shadows, I will add some warm tones for highlights. So I would go with the reds and yellows, and I truly believe it's absolutely suitable. And my step would be later to sort out these darks, the blue color out of the darks. There will be few methods to do this. Probably the simplest one would be just the hue saturation. We could see how does it work even now. I would go through select and color range. I would just simply try to make selection over the color blacks. This is actually a simple example. And I would try to get down with saturation, the blue color saturation. You can see It's really easy to sort this out, and cyan. So this is a very simple step to sort out such a transition, to make sure you're not having the blue blacks and that you're not changing the color of the clothes. And in this case, I could actually go a little harder maybe with the toning over here. And the other image, probably I would apply something very similar. And I'm going to do this, but I brought up a little different example, a little bit more difficult, something unusual. We don't have much color, so I want to work on this to go with something less colorful and see how we can actually work on this. A really difficult example. So I'm going to start once again with color balance and shadows, as well as changing blending mode to color, and then highlights. And in the same way, through apply image, of course. So I'm going to invert this straight away and go into this, inverted this into highlights. Let me take down selection and now cold tones. And what you can see, I'm applying similar values, but I have a lot of shadows on this image. So you also have to pay attention on the amount of shadows that you have on the image. Let's have a look. This is the shadows on this image. On the previous image, this was our shadows. We can clearly say the one image has much more shadows than other. What I would do here, I wouldn't really apply that much of the effect, because I know the effect will be more visible on this image. So then I'm gonna go to highlights. Let me see how I really did over here. And with highlights, of course, warm. And I have less highlights over here. This is always, if I had more shadows, and this will be the place I had more highlights. I want to be really careful. I don't want to add too much of the yellows. I don't think they suit so much over here. So something around this, I think it looks just on point. Also, this image was warm, so we need to pay attention that we had some of the warm colors already over the highlights, so this will not be that strong. So there's different really factors that affect your work. And what I would try to do right now, I would try to actually do something with these blacks, which will be a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to move it into the next lesson to work, to do some color corrections and other things.